we talked about abductions, there's this one story of the abduction of two men from Mississippi, where a sheriff secretly taped their conversations and was sort of blown away by what he heard. What was the content of that tape then that blew the sheriff away?
That's a great question. The two men were Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker, two southern Mississippi boys. You don't get much more southern in the United States. If you're south of Pascagoula, you're in the Gulf of Mexico, and you better be in a boat. I mean, it's called the Deep South. And these were just conventional, ordinary guys that went fishing one night in 1973. And Calvin was considerably younger than Charlie. He was a friend of Charlie's son. But these guys went fishing every time they could. They lived to fish. So they walked onto a piece of property, and Calvin said, by the way, it's hard for me not to do their accents because I spent Calvin.
Please do.
So with that, as maybe give me a little freedom here, Calvin said to Charlie, he said, I think we're on private property. I see a sign that says no trespassing. You're fixing to get us both arrested. This is probably not the best place we ought to be fishing, Charlie. Don't worry, Calvin. The police never come back here. And I say that with, a great respect. I love the sound of that voice, and it gives me a chance to do some impressions. In any case, they're standing on the dock and looking out on the water. Some blue lights were flashing, and Calvin said, well, I told you, and the police is right here. You can see them lights flashing. They turned around. Well, the police would have been a much better outcome. It wasn't the police. It was a craft. I just say an apparent craft, but I'm just going to call it a craft. That's how they reported it. And a non-ordinary, a saucer type, or oblong, etc. And they were immediately paralyzed with fear and maybe paralyzed with some other force. A door opened up seamlessly. Out came two creatures that didn't actually fit the standard alien look. They were more like, he called them creatures. They picked up the guys. They floated inside the craft. It was one of the first of the abductions where some kind of a procedure was performed, some kind of examination. Then they were placed back 20 minutes later, placed back on the dock. The ship left, and it actually just disappeared. Again, certain aspects of this suggest a paranormal, maybe a fugue state, some kind of shared dissociative state. Listen, I know my stuff. I've looked into all the psychological phenomena of disassociation. I would love to find conventional explanations to all of this. And then I'd feel like I can make a claim to knowledge. So in any case, I was aware of this case at the time. So in the process of working on the book, I went down to Pascagoula to get to know Calvin Parker, who has since passed away. He was in his 70s at the time. But you're referring to that moment. They're on the dock. Calvin or Charlie, the older one, said, well, we need to spend a few minutes before we decide what to do about what had just happened. I mean, that's putting it mildly. They were both just deeply shaken by whatever they had experienced. Calvin said, well, there's nothing we're going to do. What we're going to do is get up tomorrow morning and go to work. And we're not going to do anything that will displace our ability to have employment. I just got this job. He was very aware of what it would mean to report this. The idea that these guys, that you have these experiences and you're looking for attention, you're looking for Hollywood. Yeah. Hollywood may find you, but it is not a great career path to claim something like this in hopes of becoming a millionaire star of movies. So long story short, he told Calvin, I will call the police. So you don't have to, you can say you passed out if you want. So in any case, the police said, you're abducted by aliens. All right, but come on in, we'll talk. They were clearly skeptical. They went in middle of the night and they separated them. They talked with them for hours. They said, tell us again what happened, Charlie. Okay, tell us again one more time. I've told you 12 versions of this. It's always the same every time. When can I go home? I don't even want to be here now. Long story short, the sheriff, being kind of a cagey guy, a good law enforcement official, he finally said, okay, one more time. I'm going to put you guys together, get you some coffee, and I'll be right back. And what he had done was place a voice-activated tape recorder in a location. The idea being, put these guys finally in the same room together, and if they do what I think they'll do, he thought, they'll say, well, we really pull them a wool over these guys' eyes. The story's going really well, don't you think? But instead, they heard two men describing terror. I have the full transcript in my book. One of them said, I always thought maybe there was something up there, but I never thought it would come here like it did. I can't catch my breath. And he said, I need a drink. And I need sleeping pills. I know, why would such a thing happen? Calvin was weeping, a young Calvin, 18 years old. So the sheriff then listened to this tape, said these boys are telling about an experience that they've had. And the experience is real. He made that distinction. They've had a real experience. I cannot claim what the full what would have been seen by other witnesses. So I went down to Pascagoula, spent time with him, and interesting little piece of this story. Calvin Parker not only did not want attention for this, he became known as the guy who went up in the flying saucer or was taken into the flying. It is not a life path that he wanted. He prayed that it could turn back the time on the hands of the clock, and it would never happen. So he decided to start going by the name of Randy. He didn't change his name legally, named Randy Jones, let's say. He changed his name in order not to be associated with it. So about 5 or 6 years ago, he and his wife were going to a funeral, and they signed the guest book. He signed it absentmindedly, Calvin Parker. And the person behind him said, "Oh, you're Calvin Parker. Oh, this here's Calvin Parker." And both Calvin and his wife said, "Well, this isn't right. We're at a man's memorial service. This is not right for this to be." We walked out into the parking lot, and his wife said to him, "Calvin, it's time for you to write that book. You've got to come out and say what happened." Do you know, to that day, he had never even told his wife the whole story. She had never asked him. She said, "He'll tell me when he wants to tell me." And he told me, he said, "Mr. Thompson, can you imagine what it's like? I don't know what kind of relationships you've had. Can you imagine what it's like living with a woman for more than 20 years and not talking about that? It takes a toll." So I told my wife, I went home that night, I told her the full story. And we had tears and we embraced. And I just had been asked by a publisher to write a book. It was very synchronous, if you will. He wrote the book. So when he wrote the book under his own name, he was finishing his rite of passage. He was, in my terms, finishing the initiatory process that had taken him up. He'd responded to the call. His life's calling. It's not what he had chosen, but is what happened to him. So he met the call. When he wrote the book and appeared in bookstores down in Pascagoula, Mississippi, people came, "Calvin Parker's out with a book. I've been looking for this guy for years. He was hiding as Randy." No one knew what had happened to Calvin Parker. This is like a Hollywood movie. If there's a screenwriter out there, take this story and run with it, because it's, Daniel Day-Lewis or someone should be in it, but not for the reason that people think. He didn't set out to write a Hollywood blockbuster. So in any case, people came to the book reading and took him aside and said, "I remember that night. I saw lights myself, and I kept it to myself because I saw how you guys were ridiculed." So other witnesses came forward. So it is almost a Hollywood ending, that he died with the knowledge that there were others who'd seen what he'd seen. I asked him, I said, "What was it like, Calvin, being so systematically disbelieved?" He said, "I understand why the doubters doubt. I would have doubted what I was claiming too. As you know, every time you've asked me, I've given you the same account of the story. I haven't added anything. My story's pretty boring to me now. I could have embellished it. I guess that's the term that they use, embellish your story, but it doesn't make it any better if I add details that didn't happen." He had a real common sense integrity about him. And he said, I understand why people don't believe until you have it happen yourself. I can understand the skeptical response. And even now, Mr. Thompson, I don't know what happened to me and Charlie that day, but I know something happened. It was not normal, not anything normal. That's all life. And to me, that had the feeling of an authenticity about it.
Yeah.
And finally, where I come with all of this is that what's the human factor in these events? That's what moves me.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, please subscribe to the Freedom Pack channel and consider clicking here to watch another video that I think you'll enjoy.